a look at our next booklet here on financial stewardship. And you can open up in your book. We'll work through this, and we're getting a relatively early start compared to other weeks tonight, so we should be able to get through this in good time without having to rush or keep you late. Page number 2. Money always gets our attention. Life is much more enjoyable when we manage money God's way. God made everything and owns everything. God lets us use and enjoy the things that he owns. A steward manages someone else's property or money. Basic financial principles from Scripture can help us manage God's money properly, making our lives less complicated and more pleasing to the Lord. We don't have so much of an idea of what it means to be a steward in our day because it's not a common thing as it was in their days. Maybe the best picture of a steward in the Bible was Joseph. Joseph went to work for an officer of Pharaoh, and everything in that man's house, in Potiphar's house, was under Joseph's control. Joseph was a steward of the house. How many of you have ever driven you were able to drive home at night, you have driven a company car? I'm going to raise my hand, but I never have. But you have, anybody driven a company car that may be the best way for us to understand in our day what it means to be a steward. Because yes, your boss wants you to have that for whatever reason. Maybe because you get a call at 2 o'clock in the morning, and you can go right to the job, or maybe just it's a perk of your employment that hey, if you take this job, you'll have a car to drive. But in most cases, the boss doesn't want you taking that vehicle, to Atlantic City whenever you feel like it. It's not something that he wants you to there may be exceptions to this, but in most cases, the boss is not wanting you to run up the mileage. So he is entrusting you with that car as a work vehicle, and yes, you can use it to take your wife out to eat. Yes, you can use it to go to the mall or go to the grocery store in many, depending on your relationship, but don't abuse it. That's what a steward is. You are in charge of this, but don't abuse it. And that first paragraph says everything in this world belongs to God. Now, a lost person isn't going to look at their possessions that way. This is mine. I mean, you've heard many people say, I'm a self-made man, I'm a self-made woman, and what I do with my stuff is up to me. And the Christian is not to look at it that way. A Christian is to look at it as everything belongs to God, and I am a steward. So that's that word steward, and we'll be looking at it throughout the night. We ever say throughout the night, it sounds like we're going to be here for 3 hours. Throughout the study, all right? From whom do we receive our resources? God is the source. James 1:17. Turn to Psalm 24. While you're turning, I'll read these other verses. Every good gift and every perfect gift is from above, and cometh down from the Father of lights, with whom is no variableness, nor shadow of turning. So every good thing that anybody gets comes from God. Haggai 2, verse 8, God says, the silver is mine, and the gold is mine, saith the Lord of hosts. Look at Psalm 24, verse 1. The earth is the Lord's, and the fullness thereof, the world, and they that dwell therein. So God is the source, he's the owner of everything. It says, I am a steward, a manager of God's resources. God owns everything. Turn over to Luke chapter 6. Luke chapter 6, and I will meet you there in a minute. But the question is asked here, what are God's financial rules? Now, there's an outline here, and you've got to pay attention or you will lose track. They're much like my outlines when they get out of hand here, where you with A and then subpoint 1 and so forth. So I'll lead you through it. We have a big number 1 followed by a subpoint A followed by a subpoint Roman numeral 1, 2, and 3. So, but I'll guide you through it here. But what are God's financial rules? Number 1, giving is a command. Acts 20, verse number 35. I have showed you all things, how that so laboring ye ought to support the weak, and to remember the words of the Lord Jesus, how he said, it is more blessed to give than to receive. And so Jesus urged us to give. Look at Luke 6, verse 38. Give, and it shall be given unto you. Good measure, pressed down, and shaken together, and running over, shall men give into your bosom. For with the same measure that ye meet withal, it shall be measured to you again. So God clearly wants us to give. And verses on giving are all through the New Testament. By the way, don't ever let anybody tell you, well, Jesus never told us to tithe. Jesus never even talked about tithing. That's a lie. I'll tell you what Jesus said about tithing. He was talking to the Pharisees. And he said to the Pharisees, you guys, if somebody gives you a breath mint, you tithe on it, and yet you treat people like trash. Here's what he said. He said, how you treat people is the weightier matters of the law. But he referred to tithing and said, this ye ought to have done, without leaving the other undone. He didn't say treat people right instead of tithing. He said treat people right in addition to tithing. Read it for yourself. And so don't let anybody say, well, we had a family leave the church a few years ago over that. Well, you talk about tithing, and Jesus never talked about tithing. They lied. He did. It's right in there. So God commands us to give. So, all right, we're going to break this down. Are you ready? There are 3 main ways to give to God. Letter A, tithes. When we tithe, we are returning 1/10 of our increase to the Lord. To honestly tithe, one needs only arithmetic and obedience. All right, so the next set, and you can turn if you want to, over to, you know what? Let's take a look at Proverbs chapter 3. It doesn't have an eyeball next to it, but this is an important statement, and you need to see it. Proverbs chapter 3. Whoops, that is Psalms. I'll get there in a minute. So, 4 helps as you prepare to tithe. First help, the rate. In other words, how much. The percentage is, a tithe is 10% of all of our increase. Increase is anything that God has given to us. It could be income, gifts, benefits, bonuses, and other such things. And so 10%, and I believe and I practice, I tithe to our church not on my net income, but on my gross income. And in other words, just because Uncle Sam takes the first whatever percentage doesn't mean I didn't earn it. It was still my increase. And so the first fruits of all your increase, as we'll see in just a minute. So 10% of all of your increase. Here's the principle. The first fruits. Look at Proverbs 3, 9, and 10. Honor the Lord with thy substance and with the firstfruits of all thine increase. So shall thy barns be filled with plenty, and thy presses shall burst out with new wine. And you'll find the same principle in Deuteronomy 26, 10 and 11. The firstfruits. So, in Bible days, it would have meant when you put your crop in the barn, or when you slay your cattle or your sheep, you give to God the first. He doesn't even ask for the best when it comes to tithing. He asks for the first. The Passover, which was something different, just by contrast, the Passover lamb had to be your best because that represented Jesus Christ. But that wasn't tithing. That wasn't giving. That was the sacrifice that God demanded as a picture of Jesus Christ. And that had to be a spotless lamb. For the tithe, he doesn't ask for your best 10% of your animals, of your livestock. He doesn't ask for the best 10% of your crop. He asks for the first 10%. In other words, put me first. And how that translates to our day is you don't pay your bills and then see if you have enough left over to bring your tithe. You give God the first 10%. And by the way, if you've never heard this, I know that sounds crazy. And an awful lot of Christians don't live that way. And I can tell you honestly, I have no idea in our church who tithes and who doesn't. So I'm just giving you the facts. But I believe the Bible principle is that you tithe to be obedient. You tithe to the Lord the first 10% of all your increase. So, first fruits. In the Old Testament, the Jews were to give their first fruits. This meant that they gave 10% of all they received before anything was removed. This teaches that we should tithe on our gross income, what we receive before taxes and other payroll reductions. So the first principle as you prepare to tithe, the first help, is the idea of rate, how much. Secondly, the idea of responsibility. What do I do with that money? And the principle is found in Malachi chapter number 3. Malachi chapter number 3. And verses 8 through 10. Malachi 3, verses 8 through 10. Will a man rob God? Yet ye have robbed me. But ye say, wherein have we robbed thee? In tithes and offerings. Ye are cursed with a curse, for ye have robbed me, even this whole nation. Bring ye all the tithes into the storehouse, that there may be meat in mine house, and prove me now herewith, saith the Lord of hosts, if I will not open you the windows of heaven, and pour you out a blessing, that there shall not be room enough to receive it. So, it's our responsibility to bring the tithes to where the work of the Lord is. Now, let me stop. You can turn over to page number 4. We'll get going on it momentarily. But people get all twisted in knots trying to throw out tithing because it is largely taught in the Old Testament. And in the process of trying to make those arguments, they are actually the ones who become extremely, ready, legalistic. The New Testament says what? The Lord loveth a cheerful giver. And everything that Jesus addressed about grace as compared to the law, you do more under grace than you did under the law. Anytime you see Jesus comparing serving in the Spirit to serving under the law, you're always doing more. In most cases, or many cases, twice as much. Well, if we follow that principle, then we should all be tithing 20%, but I'm not going to make that case. But you see people bending over backwards to try to push tithing. And then they say, well, the storehouse, that's not the church. The church is not in the Old Testament. We're talking about a principle. Where was God doing his work in the Old Testament? The temple, the synagogues. Where is God doing his work in the New Testament? The local church. And so the parallel is indisputable if you are looking at it sincerely. But if you're going to make it your life's goal to prove, I don't have to tithe, you're going to become very legalistic, which is ironic. Because those are the people that point at tithers and say, legalists. No, we're just trying to follow the spirit of the Scriptures. And you're not going to go wrong. Now, do people get very legalistic about tithing? Sure they do. I heard about a church recently that was sending itemized lists to all of their church employees of all of their benefits. So a church employee who might be actually making $40,000 a year, by the time they looked at all the benefits they received, it was more like $60,000 or $70,000 a year, and the church was telling them, this is what you should be tithing on. That's legalistic. And we don't play that. I heard of another church that literally sent bills to the members of their church. This is what you owe. No. We don't do that. And I've always felt like if you want your church to thrive, you're giving. If you don't want your church to thrive, you're making the choice that you don't want God to work here. And I know that sounds kind of passive and laid back, but I mean, before I ever pastored, I felt that way. Why should I, as a pastor, stand up and just beat people to death about money? If they want a church here, they'll give. If they don't, they won't. And if they don't, God will move me somewhere else. And that sounds almost like a spiteful pity party. No, that's just my approach to it. There are times for sure when we have to raise some money, but I think you'd have to admit, I don't beat you over the head about money, and I never will. I want us to give with our whole hearts. I want to give with my whole heart. I want to be generous to the Lord. I want to be generous to others. And so that's the principle. That's the principle. But as a church, I can't speak for anybody else, but as a congregation and as your pastor, I'm not going to pound you over the head with that. The principle is first 10% of all your increase, that's the tithe, and then giving is over and above that, as we'll see in a minute. And the Bible principle, to me, couldn't be clearer. You bring it to the place where the Lord's doing the work, and if you belong to a church, which every Christian's supposed to, that's where you bring the tithe. Page number 4, it's as simple as ABC. Assess your increase. Become aware of everything God has given to you and calculate your tithe. B, bring the tithe to the house of God. 1 Timothy 3:15, the house of God, which is the church of the living God, the pillar and ground of the truth. And C, commit it to the Lord by placing it in the offering plate. This shows our honesty and integrity toward God and our submission to his commands. In other words, you're putting it into the plate and you are releasing it to the Lord, saying you're in charge, you're in control. And so that's the basic principles of. So we looked at the rate, we looked at the responsibility. Thirdly, the reason. Why? All right, turn to 1 Timothy chapter number 5. Why do we do this? All right, letter A, practically, tithing provides for God's work and his workers. And I'm not in 1 Timothy 5 yet. Maybe you are. I'm getting close. 1 Timothy, there we go. Chapter 5, verse 18. For the scripture saith, thou shalt not muzzle the ox that treadeth out the corn, and the laborer is worthy of his reward. And just so you can feel the context, go back one verse. Let the elders, an elder in the Bible is a generic word for leader. Let the leader in the church, let the elders or leaders that rule well be counted worthy of double honor, especially they who labor in the word and doctrine. So Paul is teaching Timothy to teach the people in the church that Timothy pastored that it is right for the church to pay the pastor and take care of him. That's not something that we have to argue so much these days. I think any sincere believer believes that. But don't forget, the New Testament church was a new concept in the first. And wait a minute, these guys aren't the priests. Remember the priests in the Old Testament? They were allowed in a certain way to take of the food that was part of the sacrifice that the Israelites brought. Now, there were restrictions on that and how and when, but people brought sacrifices. They were able to eat off of that sacrifice. And the Levites, which was the people that took care of the house of God, they didn't have an inheritance like the other tribes did, but every tribe was supposed to help take care of the Levites. So, but now we are in the New Testament, and there's these churches. And people say, well, this ain't the synagogue, this ain't the temple, these guys ain't the Levites. Should we be providing for these guys who they preach and they pray and they lead the church? And Paul's telling Timothy, make sure that you teach your people that this is the right thing to do, to take care of them. So that's the purpose there of 1 Timothy 5, 17 and 18, and that's the purpose of the tithe, is to provide for God's work and for his workers. So the first reason is practical. The second reason is private. Letter B, privately, it teaches us to fear the Lord. The fear of the Lord allows us to become consciously aware of his presence. Okay, wait, what is that talking about? All right. I know if you come to church. Everybody else in church knows if you come to church, right? Because you're either here or you're not. If they're here, they know if you're here or not. We know if you do certain other things. But one thing we have no idea what anybody else does is whether or not you tithe, but God does. So you can fake a lot of things, but you can't fake tithing because God's the one who knows. So tithing is one of the major ways that you demonstrate to the Lord that you fear him. What happened to Ananias and Sapphira? They went to church. They sold a piece of property for, I don't know, say $10,000. They brought 5,000 of those dollars and brought it to the church and announced to everybody, we sold our land and we're giving all of the profit to the church. Now, they didn't have to sell their land at all. They didn't have to give any of it to the church. But because other people were selling all their land and giving all the profit to the church, they wanted to be looked at the same way. So they came and they brought, we gave it all to the church. They didn't. They kept back a portion of it. And it wasn't the fact that they kept back, it's the fact that they lied about it. That they both dropped dead right there in church. You say, why doesn't that happen today? I'm glad it doesn't, because I wouldn't want to be the one to explain to the police sergeant when he walks through the door. No, honestly, they were putting it in the plate and they dropped dead. I'm not kidding you. I mean, I'm glad it doesn't happen today. But I do believe that when we lie, when we grieve the Holy Spirit, we die in other ways. We die slow deaths, all of us. But if we fear the Lord, we obey in private, where nobody can see. So practically, it provides for the work of God and for his workers. Privately, it teaches all of us to fear the Lord. Deuteronomy 14, thou shalt truly tithe all the increase of thy seed, that thou mayest learn to fear the Lord thy God always. Wow, okay. Turn to Malachi again, Malachi chapter 3, and we're going to look at a few different verses this time in Malachi chapter 3. What are the reasons? I'm sorry, no, that's not it. It was 4 words. See, I told you the outline could get a little tricky here. 4 helps as we prepare to tithe: the rate, the responsibility, the reason, and now we're to the reward. What does God do for us? How does God respond to tithers? Malachi 3, verse 10. Bring ye all the tithes into the storehouse, that there may be meat in mine house, and prove me now herewith, saith the Lord. By the way, the choir sings a choir opening. Prove me now, saith the Lord, prove me now, and I will pour blessing. That's based on this verse right here. Written by the way, I believe, by Brother Mike Clark, wasn't it? From this text right here. Prove me now herewith, saith the Lord of hosts, if I will not open you the windows of heaven and pour you out a blessing, that there shall not be room enough to receive it. And I will rebuke the devourer for your sakes, and he shall not destroy the fruits of your ground. Neither shall your vine cast her fruit before the time in the field, saith the Lord of hosts. And all nations shall call you blessed, for ye shall be a delightsome land, saith the Lord of hosts. When I tithe, God promises me, page 5, he will rebuke the devourer and protect my property. He will open the windows of heaven to bless me. I will have what I need when I need it. I will realize God's blessings in my life. Okay, so now we're all the way back to the beginning of the subpoints of point number 1. What are God's financial rules? Number 1, giving is a command. A, tithes. Now we're to B, offerings. Offerings, for example, to special projects for the church, bus ministry, missions, etc. Giving beyond 10% shows our love and gratitude to God. So tithing shows our obedience, that we fear the Lord. Offerings show our love for the Lord. I know I don't have to give this, but I just want to show you how much I love you, Lord. And by the way, you ought to keep these things in mind as you tithe. It's between you and God. Lord, I'm doing this because I'm obeying you. I fear you. And I'm giving on top of this because I sure do love you. Lord, I'd give you everything if I could. I have bills to pay. But I want to give this because I want you to know that I love you. That's the offering. And then C is alms. Alms is giving to others in need within my sphere of influence. Just giving because people need help. We were sitting at breakfast yesterday with Amy and I with Brother Danny Mendez and his son Landon, and we're talking about some friends of common mutual friends of ours that we haven't seen in years, but the husband and wife are just really, really struggling. And Brother Danny was going to help them. And so as we were going out to the car, I said, Amy, are you okay if we give a few dollars to Danny to help them out, just to be a blessing to them? And she said, absolutely. And so I said, Danny, now if you guys need this, use it. But if you can use some part of this just to be a blessing to them while you're with them, please do. Whatever you see fit. That's an alms. You say, well, Pastor, you just lost your reward in heaven because you told us about it. Okay, I would tell your story if I knew it, but I didn't. Well, I can't say I didn't do it, get rewards in heaven, but I did it out of love. And that's what alms are. Let me help you out. Let me help you. All right? So, number 1 principle, giving is a command. God's financial rules, giving is a command. Now, I believe we're winding down here, so don't, there's another big page, right? We'll still make our wind down here. We're in good shape time-wise. Number 2, go to work. Turn to Proverbs 22. We won't look at all these. In fact, let's look at 2 Thessalonians 10. 2 Thessalonians, no, there is no 2 Thessalonians 10. So instead, let's go to 2 Thessalonians 3. And this is a very famous verse, but this would be a great time for my eyes and your eyes to see it. Let him that stole steal no more, but rather let him labor, working with his hands the things which is good, that he may have to give to him that needeth. 2 Thessalonians 3, verse 10. For even when we were with you, this we commanded, that if any would not work, neither should he eat. And that sounds awful mean from the Apostle Paul there, but that is a principle. God says that we, and this is what we demand of ourselves, by the way. This is not what you think of when you see, somebody hungry on the street and you have the impulse to feed them. Well, if a man doesn't work, neither should he eat. Sorry, fella. No, this is for me to police me and you to police you. that we should be workers. The greatest motivation for work is hunger. To smile in the harvest, I must sweat today. Laziness results in poverty, instability, and illegal activity. Page number 6. Guard against debt. Here's another principle of another one of God's rules. Proverbs 22:7, the rich ruleth over the poor, and the borrower is servant to the lender. So guard against debt. Debt creates additional masters in your life. Stay free to serve God and others. If you cannot pay, do not charge it. Pay off what you owe right away. Get serious about debt before debt controls you. You can do more to reverse debt in months when you are serious than you can in a decade when you are casual about it. Debt discourages us. Debt distresses us. Debt divides us. And debt disqualifies us. Guard against debt. And you will find that as you have the opportunity to use this series with new believers, a lot of them need to hear this. Number 4, gain contentment. Turn to Hebrews chapter 13 while I read for you 1 Timothy 6. But godliness with contentment is great gain. And having food and raiment, let us be content therewith. Hebrews 13, verse number 5. Let your conversation be without covetousness, and be content with such things as ye have. For he hath said, I will never leave thee, nor forsake thee. Philippians 4, verse number 11. Not that I speak in respect of want, for I have learned in whatsoever state I am, therewith to be content. Learn to want what you have, not what you do not have. Contentment is recognizing that God has already given you everything you need for your present happiness. Number 5, get on a budget. Look at, you turn to Luke 14. I'll turn to Proverbs 27. And you can listen as I read Proverbs 27, 23. Be thou diligent to know the state of thy flocks, and look well to thy herds. Now, you don't have flocks and herds. You have dollars and cents. And so that's the principle there. The Bible is teaching us to know how much money we have to spend, to know what our needs are, and to have a plan to make sure that we don't spend more than we have or more than we earn. Luke 14:28. For which of you intending to build a tower sitteth not down first and counteth the cost, whether he have sufficient to finish it? Lest haply after he hath laid the foundation and is not able to finish it, all that behold it begin to mock him. So have a budget for yourself. Let your budget be your boss. What do I have to have? What do I need to have? What do I want to have? What do I dream to have? And your answers to those questions will set different priority levels for you in your spending. Just because you have, when you're a little kid and you ask for something at the store and your parents say, we can't afford that. You go, I'm looking at cash right there in your hand. What do you mean you don't have the money for it? Well, what they meant was, we can't make that a priority. The food on the table is the priority, not the toy that you want me to buy right now. So, next, give to yourself and your family. Go ahead and turn to 1 Timothy chapter 6, and I'll meet you there in a minute. 1 Timothy chapter 6. Give to yourself and your family. Proverbs 21, verse number 20. There is treasure to be desired and oil in the dwelling of the wise, but the foolish man spendeth it up. So, notice this is way down on the list, but it ought to be something that you give attention to. Don't be such a spendthrift that you don't express your love to the people in your life. There is a balance. Learn to save something for difficult times. Number 7, be generous with God and others. Proverbs 19:17, he that hath pity upon the poor lendeth unto the Lord, and that which he hath given will he pay him again. And then 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse number 18, that they do good. He's talking about how to treat the wealthy people that you pastor, Timothy, that they do good, that they be rich in good works, ready to distribute, willing to communicate. And as we saw on Sunday, that word communicate is used very often in the New Testament to mean give to others and give to the work of the Lord. Let's end together in 2 Corinthians chapter number 9. And we're not getting out early tonight, but we are getting out pretty much on time for a Wednesday night. 2 Corinthians chapter 9, verse number 7. Everybody knows the end of this verse. Every man according as he purposeth in his heart, so let him give, not grudgingly or of necessity, for God loveth a cheerful giver. That doesn't mean that you can cheat God if you're grumpy. It means learn how to love God so much that you want to give. God always commends generosity and giving, and he condemns greed and covetousness. There's a lot to take in there. There's a lot that I would recommend that we all go back and consider again. I have my entire life I don't want to, there's 50 reasons to criticize for this statement, so I don't know how it's going to sound to you. I have all my life not really cared about money. Not really cared about things. Now, if that sounds good to you, there's definitely a dangerous side to that, because we all need money to live. And that's why Jesus said, he that is faithful in that which is least is faithful also in much. God doesn't care about money either, but he does care about what we do with it. We won't take time. Luke 16, Jesus said, if you take care of that which is least, God will commit to you the true riches. What are the true riches? Wisdom. You may not care about money. It may not be important to you, but if you don't care about that which is least, and that's what he's talking about, if you don't take care of that which is least, why should he entrust with you wisdom, which is one of his greatest treasures and jewels? So, whether it's important to you or not, whether it's I'm saying not caring about it in contrast to a greedy person who he just lives to sock away the money. He just lives to buy the toys and to have the bigger house and the fanciest car. That's what I mean about not caring about money in contrast to that. And I don't want to go down that road because we could be here all night, and I'll have to tell you again, I don't fault anybody for collecting things or having a nice car or whatever. You work hard, you take care of money, you do what you want to, and I commend you for that, for your work ethic. I am saying, if you are more like me, where you say, you know what, if I have it and you need it and I can help you, I will help you, and that's gotten me in plenty of trouble. But you have to take care of it. Because if you don't take care of that thing which matters the least, then why would God entrust you with the things that really do matter, which is wisdom, influence. These things do matter. These things are eternal. And so money is sort of his gauge to say, are you flippant about that? Then you'll be flippant about these other things too. I hope that makes sense. It's a huge concept, and it's not one that any of us can afford to ignore. Let's stand together.